All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. Thank whoever got you here. Again, shout out to podmatch.com that has revived the guests, absolutely revived the guests on my show for a while there. It was just a solo episode show. And to my regular listeners, you are in for another treat, as you always are, because we have someone who I must have said it so many times on this show that you might be tired of hearing me say it, but I have someone else to affirm this concept of there's a huge difference between leadership and management. All right, a huge difference between leadership and management. He has done a ton of work in regards to helping leaders be better leaders, helping leaders create efficiency in the workplace. So, with all that, I don't want to make the intro too long, Marty. With all that, welcome to the show, Marty Strong. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Let's just jump right into it, man, because you have a ton of work out there that's centered around the concept of building great leaders. And your background in the Navy SEALs, I believe, is kind of what built your habits and kind of started you on the probably the process of understanding what a real leader is all about. So it might be best to just start off with just giving a little bit about your background in the Navy SEALs and how you were able to go from there to develop into the author, thought leader, and kind of the consultant you are today.
Sure. So I joined the Navy to get away from Nebraska. I was,
Was that the motivation?
yeah, not for any altruistic reason, not even for God and country. I was just trying to escape a really crappy home life and divorced family situation. So
Huh.
I went to a recruiting station with two of my buddies to join the Marine Corps. I chickened out. One of the other guys chickened out. One of the guys joined the Marine Corps. And I joined the Navy, and I got kind of hornswoggled into going into the SEAL selection program,
Hmm.
and somehow 6 months later I was a SEAL. So that was kind of the beginning. It was all stumbling and bumbling and no real planning or thought, and just a dumb 17-year-old kid
But
saying yes to a lot of people.
it's there's something to be said about that because you kind of mentioned that you were in a family situation that you want to get out of, and there's a lot of people who are stuck in those situations and they don't do anything to get out of it. So there's something that you can kind of hang your hat on and say, at least I was able to take some sort of action when I was around situations that I didn't want to be around, because I can resonate with that feeling as well. When there's certain things going on in your family that you don't want to be around, you just got to figure it out. You don't know where it's going. You just gotta go and figure something else out. So
Yeah, I mean, most of the time people are talking about leadership as institutional leadership,
yes,
leading an organization or something. But it starts with yourself, right?
amen.
When you get to a situation, and thank God my brother and sister also did well, but you
Hmm.
get to a situation where that fork in the road emotionally, and do I go down the road where I'm a victim of the circumstances and kind of succumb to it? Or do I say, the hell with this, I'm going to take charge
Hmm.
of my life and decide I'm going to go down this way in spite of my circumstances?
Yeah,
And not everybody takes the right path. And sometimes later in life, you figure out how to get back on that positive path. But that's that's a leadership decision on what's the best thing for me, what's the right thing to do,
hmm,
and it takes maturity to do that, and it's rare in kids. I was lucky enough; I just felt that way.
right.
So I ended up going into the Navy. Was a SEAL for 20 years. Retired as an officer, and I had an undergraduate degree in business and an MBA. So I thought I was going to go into business. Instead, I decided to go into managing money. So I managed money for 8 years with UBS. You wouldn't think there's a lot of leadership there, but it turns out that people are very strange and emotional about their money. And most of these are high net worth people. They spent a
Right.
lifetime trying to accumulate the money,
Yeah.
building business for 30 something years. Now they got this big chunk of change from selling it. They're
Hmm.
scared to death they're going to lose it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize there was, because I hadn't been around people with a lot of money most of my life.
Right.
So I didn't realize there was so much emotion. And what they really need is they need leadership. They need someone to sit them down, calm them down.
Hmm.
And it's every time the market goes crazy or something happens, it's almost like somebody yelled fire in their mind, and they have to
Right.
be reassured. You have to point to the plan. You have to do all those things. So there's weird things like that. That decision when I was a teenager, stumbling into managing money, that turned out to be a huge 8 years of leadership experience about human nature,
Hmm.
which I hadn't I didn't have anything to fall back on. SEALs are basically self-motivated.
Right.
You know, you don't have SEALs worried all the time. SEALs basically, as soon as something's going wrong with it, they're like, who's in charge? What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's if you're not used to people that don't have that kind of mindset, it's shocking when you're suddenly around people like that.
Yeah.
And in that situation, if you have any leadership tendency or capabilities at all, they can sense it and everybody looks right at you. It's like you're the one person that seems to have the calm and the poise in the middle of the storm. And whether you are the appointed leader or whatever, you're going to be the leader for the moment because everybody else is looking for somebody to lead.
Right. What do you how do you kind of manage the relationship between leadership and money? Because that everything you just kind of explained tells a whole lot. I mean, even myself included, I went to college wanting to be a business major. And a lot like you, I got there and I'm taking these courses, and everything was about accounting. Everything was about just kind of staying afloat, and everything was never about taking any risk, never taking charge, never actually being in business and being the person you want to be. Yet, like you said, you're kind of naturally drawn, especially when you're talking about to young people, you're naturally drawn to people who have money, and you automatically place them as the leader. You automatically place them as the decision maker. And as you just said, sometimes it can water down their ability to actually lead. So how do you kind of manage that dilemma that money always creates when it comes to finding great leaders? Because I agree with you, man. There's so much that goes around. There's so many people that are looking at the wrong folks as leaders because they have money, and they're just not they're not leading us in the right direction. So how do you sort of deal with that challenge at all, if at all?
So the first thing is, and you kind of alluded to it in your opening,
Mm-hmm.
the definition of leadership. And one way of leading that's not episodic or in the moment is to think strategically. And so with money, the way you calm people down, the way you kind of get them into a path, a course is a plan. And that calms people down. And that plan can be a risk-taking plan. It could be leaning forward into their concerns, et cetera. But the fact there's a plan, there's scaffolding around it. And so that's what I learned to do with the money management thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things went wrong, I'd say, come on in. Or things went wrong like in the market,
Mm-hmm.
come on in. First thing I do is I pull out their plan, dust it off. And when they walked in there, I laid it all out for them all over again. You have a plan. So what did we think about when we built this plan? And then calm down. So that's more of
Wow.
a way of leading long-term, like strategic leadership.
Right.
And having in a business, you're basically saying, looking at the horizon and saying, you see that spot out there? That's what we're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to look like in 24 months is this. And what we're going to feel like in 24 months is this. And the
Mm-hmm.
plan from that point on the horizon back to today is what we're doing and how we're executing and why we're executing. So you give them their why, you give them their compass heading. And then the other problem with money and
Mm-hmm.
the difference between management and leadership is risk mitigation isn't the same thing as risk taking. And
Wow.
risk mitigation is all about managing the risk and containing the risk,
Mm-hmm.
controlling the risk. So what you end up with is a very organized, micromanaged, backward-looking person, organization of any size,
Mm-hmm.
and they're so worried they're going to make a mistake, they don't even think about the future. They just want to make it to tomorrow. Whereas risk taking is, yeah, we have to kind of take care of what we have, the husband, what we have,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to leverage what we have, and we have to become better. We have to become stronger. We have to deliver a better product, a better service. We have to be a better person. We have to go to college. That's a risk. That's a pain in the butt. We have to go to a trade school, whatever it is, but you have to take the risk to
Mm-hmm.
get the gain.
Yeah.
So leaders tend to be the kinds of people that inspire organizations or individuals to do that second thing, to
Mm-hmm.
take their resources, however meager or however large, and have them commit to a better future. Managers tend to, and they're trained this way out of school, right? That's what school teaches you, is to
Exactly.
control, maintain, and mitigate. And what they're doing is they're holding on to all the books in the library are exactly where they're supposed to be. Nobody's allowed to check out a book because it's perfect. It's an equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be
Yeah.
chaos if somebody checked a book out, right?
Yes,
The point
exactly.
of the library is to pull the book out and become better for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I personally have seen this in many situations. I'm in fitness, education, and in athletics. And I've previously worked for 6 gyms, Marty, that have gone out of business, permanently closed. And the issue was a lot of these managers and like there were owners, people who bought into the franchise, but didn't know whether they were the manager or the owner because everything they were doing was based on what the franchise was telling them to do. They were the owner some days. They didn't know which way to go. So when it comes to particularly the small business owner or even the person that's aspiring to be a business owner, nowadays, what steps do you sort of put people on? I know you have several books out in which you touch on a lot of these things. What steps do you recommend that people take when it comes to, maybe wanting to be in business for themselves and actually figuring out which business to buy? Because there's so many businesses out there that you can buy, and it's so hard to actually find positive leadership and positive ways and figure out what exactly is going to be that home run. What exactly is going to be that thing that's for me? So how do you talk to people like that want to do that?
So I do a lot of
Mhm.
counseling with military people who are getting ready to get out of the military.
Okay.
And I don't have a particular lane that I think is better than any other. Sometimes I'll say the best thing for you to do is go right back to work with the government.
You get a job.
After
Right?
talking to them, because they're concerned about risk, or they want to know where the next paycheck's gonna come from, they got kids, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But then at the other end of that spectrum, so that's a safety spectrum. Do exactly what I've been doing for 20 years, for the next 20 years with the government, and I got security and all that. The other end of the spectrum is I want to start a business. Well, that's, you're rolling the dice, you're hawking your house.
Yeah.
Your quality of life is going to hell in a handbasket because you're going to be, working 20-hour days.
Yeah, you're gonna be the business. Again, that was the issue that
Yeah,
every single business owner, I mean, that I've met, that's what happens to them. You start to let the business run you instead of you running the business. It becomes their life. It is all they do. So
yeah. And there's a phase for that. But the
Mhm.
way you kind of get around that
Mhm.
is if you're going to be on your own, one, you have to be involved in something you care about and that you get excited about.
Mhm.
Not just something you read in a magazine or you heard on a podcast and they say, hey, I think I'm going to get into,
Right.
I don't know, marijuana farms, or I'm going to get into reselling of cars, or because
Uh-huh.
if it sounds like it's a moneymaker, but you don't know anything about it and you don't really care about it, you're going to sputter out pretty quick, because when the
Right.
sacrifices start being demanded of you,
Mhm.
they're going to have an early moment. You're going to say, what am I doing this for? You never
Mhm.
want to have that question as somebody who's going to start a business. The what
Okay.
am I doing this for should be the reason you got into the business.
Mhm.
So if you want to create you want to go out and buy a farm or lease some property and have a dog training academy because you love dogs,
Mhm.
okay, then that's what you love.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. Try to find something that you're really passionate about and you love.
Mhm.
The second thing is apprentice yourself in that organization, industry, that lane. Go and volunteer to work at the puppy farm. Go and volunteer to work at that particular kind of facility, that particular kind of organization. Volunteer to be a waiter or a busboy in a restaurant if you want to start a restaurant.
Yeah.
And ask thousands of questions and consider and even going as minimum wage. But what you're doing is you're trying to create kind of a free academy of skills and knowledge related to what you're passionate about. And other people are going to start making you smarter every day, and you see the reality of it.
Right.
And sometimes, even though you're passionate about it, the reality you realize, well, I thought owning a restaurant was making people happy with good food, not managing, ticked off waitresses and trying to figure out what I'm going to hire the next receptionist.
Yeah.
But
I
that's what you get
tried to
sucked
yeah.
into, right? All of a sudden you're the HR manager instead of
Right.
the person, or you want to be the chef. Well, you're not going to
Right.
be the chef because, anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
So by apprenticing yourself and getting in there, two things are going to happen. One, you'll find out whether what you're passionate about is actually worth doing, fun to do, and you'll get knowledgeable about it. The second thing is you'll start building your personal plan. The story about the guys that started Outback when they were in college in Texas, they all worked in restaurants and they all sat down at night and they would try to figure out what are they going to do when they get their degrees. And eventually they realized that every place they worked for sucked. Every restaurant sucked.
Yeah.
Something was wrong with it. And they started putting their heads together about what was right. And they made lists of what was wrong.
Mhm.
And they came up with this comprehensive, if we owned a restaurant, this is what we would do, and this is what we wouldn't do.
Yes.
And then they end up creating Outback Steakhouse.
Yes.
So, that's coming from not because you were the boss of the restaurant.
Mhm.
You didn't own the restaurant. You
Yeah.
were just a worker bee. But you know what? You see so much when you're at that ground level, the
Yeah.
truth of it, the
Mhm.
real truth of it. So a lot of people have a hard time with that, but I'll tell people in the military,
Mm-hmm.
if you're 6 months before getting out, or somebody like my kids, I got 5 grown kids. If you're ready to get out, you don't like what you're doing anymore after 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Spend 3 or 4 months trying to decide what you want to do next, then start researching and studying it. Go out and volunteer or try to see if you can get even an intern. Even as a 30-year-old, you can intern. I'll come in and be an unpaid intern. I want to learn what the marketing business is about. Even though you're working over here in supply chain management, that's a big leap because
Right.
it's different, but do the same thing, same process.
Right.
Go through that methodology, check it out for real. People that go to law school find out when they finally they pass the bar exam and get into a law firm, they're clerks.
Yeah.
And they go, what did I do this for? Well, you would have known that if you did the research and maybe volunteered or interned in college. You wouldn't have spent the next 3 years in law school to find, and because the law school dropout rates are pretty high, but the percentage after the first or second year of graduating lawyers that get the bar that are still lawyers 2 years later
Right.
is dramatic.
Right.
Because that's when they finally find out that if you're a brand new lawyer, you're a clerk, you're not standing there like on the TV show
Exactly.
arguing with the
Exactly.
judge.
I met a ton of pre-law classmates back when I was in college, and everything you had just mentioned, so much of that I resonate with, because I'd say maybe 4 years ago I was telling people that I wanted to open up my own youth center, and then I became an educator at a daycare, and I started to see what the kids do and what the center directors do. I said, I don't want to. I said, nope, this is not going to be for me. So I switched my North Star to open up my own school of marketing. And ever since then, everything has kind of been, let's go see what somebody else is going through first. And then I'm going to organize my mission statement, organize what it is I want to do. But again, like you kind of started alluding to, this is a lifelong process. This is not something that you're going to just wake up one morning and say, okay, that's going to be my thing. You've got to commit to a certain lifestyle. You got to commit to what it is you want to do. And you have to really, really love it. Love the thing and chase the actual thing. And Marty, that kind of brings me to my next question, especially me as an educator now, is we're kind of socialized to go the opposite direction though. We're kind of socialized, as in, you're talking about the business schools in college, but we are kind of socialized to be in a situation where you go to school, you go to college, then you're supposed to go get a college job where somebody else is paying you. We're not really socialized to go and learn on the job training and stuff like that. How do you teach this to young people, especially the younger people? How do you sort of incorporate some of these leadership tools within our young people when it comes to, just how to navigate this? Because the way they're going to be socialized when they get to the school system, they're just going to be told, hey, do this because this job is going to pay you more. Forget about if you love it or not.
Very difficult because you're fighting against the grain of what is now, say, a 60-year tradition, which started right after World War II, which is the idea that the American dream was to go to a public school, get grades good enough to go into college, graduate from college, and improve your lot in life.
Yeah,
and that's what the parents of the baby boomers, who are all Depression era and World War II era people, they desperately wanted that for their kids. They pounded it into kids. Well, those kids, the baby boomers, thought that was the path. That's the magic formula, and so they pounded it into their kids. And so what happens is society changes, and the number of degrees that were available in 1960 is probably 1/10 of what is available now, but they were all practical degrees.
Yeah.
So you didn't run much of a risk of getting a degree and not finding a job that would have a paycheck attached to it. Well, that kind of changed in the late 70s and early 80s. Suddenly there was all these degrees that didn't have a return on investment in the economic marketplace.
Like certifications and things like that too, right?
All those things. So nobody's telling them this. And of course, academia is not, because they're getting paid to teach you how to teach you how to analyze color schemes or something. And you get out there and you say, okay, and then there's no jobs. So then there's this big letdown, which is kind of what the younger generations now are having. This big almost around when COVID started, early 2020.
Right.
They started going out there and there wasn't a job for them because nobody told them that what the degree program they picked wasn't going to align with a paycheck that was worth, could pay for an apartment, let alone anything else. So then everybody started coming home.
Mhm.
Resentment about the lie, resentment about the false truth of it's all going to be
I mean,
safe.
you said the word resentment. When I first graduated college, resentment was like an understatement. So, I mean,
Yeah.
totally understand where you're getting at, man.
So think from a societal point of view.
Mm-hmm.
If society was able to communicate like public notices, the second they realized that that situation existed, what in a perfect world should have happened is they should have diverted a massive amount of money to vocational schools
Mm-hmm.
that were aligned with all the vocations in the economy,
Yeah.
and then told everybody what those returns were, and then the government and everybody should have started talking up that the quality of those kinds of trades and the
Mm-hmm.
impact on life was, as equal, it was equal to having a liberal arts degree. Because remember, society, entertainment, movies, everybody said, oh, if you've got a liberal arts degree, you're more important than a plumber. Your
Yeah.
life's more important than a plumber.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Well, by 2020, if you were a plumber, you're making $200,000 a year. And if
Right.
you were a liberal arts student, you were a waitress and living in your parents' basement.
Exactly.
But then nobody wanted to say that because the media was involved in the story, and academia controls a lot of education, obviously. So that's those are the headwinds. What I would say to anybody is that story and kind of like the path thing again. So that's the way it is, but you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice to follow the path that I talked about earlier. You have the choice to decide, what do I want to do? What do I think I want to do? And then I'm going to go out and apprentice myself, kind of put myself out there. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if I asked half the people that you run into, have you ever dug a ditch before for like 3, 4 hours? Well, no. Well, how could you learn? Well, go out and dig a ditch,
Right.
right? The practical knowledge of how to dig a ditch, like the practical knowledge of doing any blue collar work or any of those things, you
Mm-hmm.
come back and realize people work their butts off,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you aren't exposed to that, you don't know they're working their butts off like that.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all things you can go out and educate yourself
Mm-hmm.
on your own, unilateral. You don't need a boss, you don't need a leader to inspire you. You just have to say, look, I'm in a pretty safe country. I'm just going to go try a couple things. And you can do that at any age, which is also what I tell people retiring from one profession to another, wherever they are. I'll say, well, how long does it take to become an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever? And
Mm-hmm.
they're 38, 37 years old coming out of the military after 20 years. And they'll tell me the answer. It's like 3 years, 4 years, whatever. And I said, okay. So how old are you? Well, I'm 38. So he said it takes 4 years. So you'll be 42 when you come out of med school and go into your residency.
Right.
And they're like, what? Yeah. You could do an entire 20-year career
Right.
in 4 years in school, just like some kid coming out of high school, and
Right.
you can go right into your residency and become a doctor or a dentist, or you can
Right.
become a pilot, or you can become a
Yeah.
lawyer or an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing stopping you from a standpoint of time. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that's stopping you is an attitude that there's only one path in life, and I'm on it, I'm stuck with it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not. You can change your passions every 10, 12 years and go in a different direction for the rest of your life. There's nothing stopping you.
Yes, and I think it's a very good point you make in terms of the kind of the downplaying and the dismissing that we make in vocational schools, trade schools, schools that actually give you a certification and they tell you this is specifically what you're going to be doing, and we play up the big major university because it's like you said, there's tuition, there's money involved in it. We don't want to put too much truth out there too soon, and then next thing you know, you see those big universities, they're less enrollment. Actually, as of this recording, there's a article I got coming out. I played a program named Stony Brook University. It was an FCS Division I program, and there was also an FCS Division I program named Hofstra University, and they cut their football program just to build a medical school. Now, at the time, I didn't know why they did it because I was in my football playing circle. But when you think about it, it's like Hofstra, doctor or football player, who exactly do we want
Yeah.
to our school? And again, it's like you said, it's making sure you're talking about having a trade, having a skill, having something you can do that is going to require that you know specifically you're going to become, whether it's a doctor, plumber, what electrician, whatever it is. And I do want to make sure we talk a little bit about your books and some of the intellectual property that you have out there. The one of them is Be Nimble, and then you have a ton of stuff that's kind of talking about the Navy and your background. So feel free to kind of speak on that a little bit and how it can help the situation we're talking about.
There's 3 business books. I've got 9 novels out.
That was it, yeah. Right.
The first one was Be Nimble. It's all about leadership and focuses on crisis and chaos and scaling and kind of the dynamic situations and really what defines leadership apart from management. To me, management is the ability to oversee, establish and improve processes, systems, and the functions of people by resume.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is when all that blows up. Because a manager, if any of that gets tweaked and it's a little bit out of shape, they'll
Yeah.
just pull up the instruction guide, right? It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
But if you lost
your
your one,
yeah.
if you lost your one supply chain partner,
Yeah.
there's no process you can go look up. You're in trouble.
Right.
And those are leadership moments. And you can be both a manager who has been trained to be a leader when leading is required. But if you've never been trained to be a leader, and there's hardly any leadership training really out there, definitely not in colleges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you come out of college and you think my job is to maintain stability,
Mm-hmm.
mitigate risk, and vet the systems and the processes and the people based on somebody else's processes. And then that's how I manage. And then the building's on fire and you're looking around and say, who's going to tell us what to do?
Yeah.
And they all look at you and they point at you and they go, well, you're the guy in charge.
Yeah.
Well, I've never been taught to be the guy in charge in this situation, which is
Exactly.
when leadership's required.
Mm-hmm.
So Be Nimble talks a lot about that, all in the business context. Be Visionary is all about being free to dream and to think big and to also kind of put your head on a swivel to think 360 degrees and push the horizons out 24, 36 months. Stop looking in the rearview mirror. Stop thinking that whatever happened yesterday or last month, you can just project it forward and it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or your plan, your strategy is to take last year's performance, add 5% and push it forward. Because while you're doing that, the whole world could be shifting dramatically 45 degrees in a different direction.
Yeah.
Your customer base, your competitors, the product that you're selling, all those things could be falling out from under you. And you don't even know because you've got your nose down looking, at the tips of your toes.
Exactly.
So that book's all about that.
Right.
Yeah. And what I said earlier about once you've decided what it is, take the point on the horizon, work your operations plan back, and then go for it.
Mm-hmm.
The third book, Be Different, is all about creativity and innovation. And that's out for pre-sale right now. It's coming out. Its full releases, I think, in October.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 books on business. A lot of the same philosophies kind of flow through them. They're not repeats at all of each other. The SEAL part is kind of in there where it's applicable.
Right.
And each one, I talk about SEALs being highly creative and innovative. They have really high IQs. Most people don't know that.
Right.
They get to see the cartoon character in the movies and TV shows. So I got to talk a lot about things and Be Different that I didn't talk about in the other 2 about SEALs. The others, I talked about how do you handle crisis? How do you handle problems? And how do you think big? And how do you kind of maintain what the military calls situational awareness? So those are the 3 books.
So if there are people listening, who would be like, if they're like your ideal client, the ideal person that you help, how would they get in touch with you? What would they do? What would be your entry point into kind of working with you in your world?
You just go to martystrongbenimble.com.
Mm-hmm.
All my books are on Amazon, but that's kind of where I have my speaking material. I have a lot of my other stuff, consulting and access to the books.
Is there an ideal prospect that you have in mind that may be listening to me right now? Or is there a manager that maybe wants to be a better leader, their corporate structure? How do you kind of prospect your people and things like that? Or is it just kind of...
It's funny. What I did was, the reason I wrote the second book was because the people I have in writing, there's a thing called a beta reader. So you send them out to people that are the likely audience for the material. So they can kind of, raise the red flag and say, this doesn't make any sense, or you lost me here, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to write a motivational book and they're bored out of their mind, they'll tell you that kind of thing. So I had a bunch of friends of mine that were mostly CEOs and senior executives reading every chapter of Be Nimble.
Right.
And they were actually in charge of lots and lots and lots of people, but they were mostly in charge of managers in charge of lots of people, right? They were one layer above it. And the stuff that I hit was so practical that it resonated with them as senior leaders. And then they immediately thought it would resonate with their subordinate leaders. So as soon as those books come out, my beta readers started buying 50, 100 copies to distribute to their people. Because the lessons in there were lessons they learned the hard way, but they also realized, like I said in the book and here, nobody was teaching them that.
Got it.
Someday they were going to be at the top of the organizational chart, and somebody's going to point at them and say, start leading.
Yeah.
So they also pointed out that nobody was teaching anything about how to develop strategy. So that's why I wrote the second book, based on the feedback of the beta readers. And so I at first I thought, okay, so my market must be CEOs, business owners, things like that. But the people that I had as beta readers give me feedback, said, sure, we love this, but the next layer down, you know, the self-made business owner, the independent business owner, the middle managers, and the senior managers are getting ready to take a step up and have to make big decisions about a lot of people. They're all kind of left in this wasteland of no information.
Right. And that's actually important that you mention that as well, because again, this beast that we have in social media, everyone's calling themselves an entrepreneur, everyone's calling themselves kind of a business owner. And it's important that we find the people that talk leadership and give you the practical advice that you need before you go and make a decision that will lead you down a path that you really just don't want to be on. So, you know, with all that, Marty, I do want to be very respectful of your time. I definitely appreciate you coming on. The way I close out all the shows and what I do is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. I want you to go back to young Marty, you know, 17, in a family situation that you don't want to be in. And you just decide that you go into the Navy. I want you to pretend that that young man has come into the Zoom room. Just give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Yeah, I would say that you have to take a deep breath, look at examples in life, in history, of people that have on their own made their way, and emulate those people. And like I tell people that are thinking about going to SEAL training, I say, stay away from the sad people, stay away from the people that are complaining. Stay really close to the people that are laughing when things are really bad, because those are the kind of people that are going to give you the energy and the confidence to follow your own path.
Amen to that. I times to 10, I love the stay away from the people that are complaining. I can't say that enough, because they do nothing but tear you down. They absolutely drive me crazy. So with all that, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.